Happy Sabbath, brethren, and hoping that everyone is in good condition. To be exact, almost 2 years have already passed since the COVID-19 pandemic caught the whole world by surprise. An experience in our lifetime that we will not forget. We were caught by surprise while the whole world was doing its business as usual, and people were busy and traveling and enjoying life till that fateful day that a virus contracted from an animal spreads rapidly to the rest of the world. It all started in Wuhan City, China, December of 2019, or a month or even 2 months earlier. As reported, the virus originated from bats, then transferred to pangolins, then to humans. It came from the wild market in Wuhan City and then spread rapidly worldwide. It is so sad to think that most of the pandemics that had spread in the whole world came from eating unclean animals, like this COVID-19 virus. And it seems that the whole world has not learned from the past lessons of the pandemics. Since March 2020, we have experienced lockdowns, travel bans, and strict protocols. The schools, the businesses, the offices, the commercial areas, the malls, the hotels, and the restaurants had been shut down and closed operations. It posted a deep impact on the world economy that resulted to recession and negative GDP growth in most of the countries. As of end November, the following statistics can be derived from Johns Hopkins University. 263 million total cases worldwide with almost 5.3 million deaths, or an average of 2% deaths from the total number of cases. The 263 million total cases only represents 3.75% of world population 7 billion. The US registered the highest cases and deaths with almost 49 million cases and 780,000 deaths. And in the last 28 days, US posted 2.3 million new cases with 30,000 deaths. There are ongoing surges that are happening in US, in Europe, in Russia, and in Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. The World Health Organization emphasized that one way to battle this pandemic that would pave way for the reopening of the economy is to have the herd immunity. And that is to vaccinate at least 70% of world's population. As such, the infection from the virus will slow down. In December of 2020, the first inoculation of AstraZeneca vaccine was administered. Since then, a total of 8 billion doses have already been administered worldwide, consisting of different vaccines: Moderna, Pfizer, Janssen, AstraZeneca, Sinovac, Sinopharm, and brands from Russia and India. The country of Israel has more than 95% vaccinated population. Japan has at least 70%. And our country for now stands at only 35%. The Philippines is aiming to reach total vaccination of at least 55 million at the end of the year, and at least 80% of bracket 12 to 17 years old for the kids. The whole world is still far from reaching the herd immunity. The administration of these vaccines are only under EUA, and that is emergency use authorization, and still in clinical trial stage. During this pandemic, so far we experienced 3 waves. The first wave, the one that was originated from Wuhan. Then the second wave, we called it the UK variant, while in other countries it was the Lambda variant. And the third wave was the Delta, which originated in India. And just when the whole world thought that the pandemic is about to end and it's over, lo and behold, a new variant of concern is now spreading and considered to be the fourth wave of this pandemic. It is the Omicron variant, which originated in South Africa. Scientists are concerned that Omicron has a very high number of mutations. Many of them in genes that code for the spike protein, which the coronavirus uses to latch onto and invade the human cells. Early evidence suggests that people who previously recovered from COVID-19 may have a higher risk of reinfection with Omicron compared with prior variants. And that is according to the statement from the World Health Organization. It is reported that a person with immune deficiency contracted the virus and had at least 30 mutations instantly. This virus, the Omicron variant, is considered infectious 5 times or 500% than the Delta variant and could spread rapidly in the whole world. However, it is noticed that the cases are considered only mild and symptoms are just like a common influenza flu. And as of this message, there is no recorded death yet caused by this variant. The vaccine manufacturers are now in a hurry to upgrade the vaccines that will counter against the new variant. This new variant could spread worldwide and will eventually immune most of the world's population. And if you look at it on the positive side, it could end the pandemic as everyone will get infected and will get immune by it. With all these developments, considering the ongoing trial tests of this oral vaccine, the questions are, when will this pandemic end? Maybe in 6 months' time? Or in a year time? Or even still in the next 2 years? We do not know. The Bible is clear about the events that we will witness towards the end time. Jesus himself prophesied in his famous Olivet prophecy. And let's have a quick review of it. In the 24th chapter of the book a book according to the Gospel of Matthew, we can read that start in verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was walking away with his disciples when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. And he said, "Do you see all these things?" Jesus asked. "Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." And as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen?" Talking of the destruction of the temple. "And what will be the sign of your coming and the sign of the end of the age?" Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you. For many shall come in my name, claiming, 'I am the Messiah,' and will deceive many. There are those who will claim as the Son of God. And even here in our country, we already have one. He called himself as the appointed Son of God. And we all know who is that one claiming the title. And to continue in verse 6, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. But see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." During this pandemic time, so far the world is at peace, battling only the war against the virus. As everyone is so busy with this pandemic, battling against the virus. So there was no wars and not even rumors of wars in the whole world. Then he said there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. In fact, just recently, we had experiences of this. Okay, we had several earthquakes here in the Philippines. And he said all these are the beginning of birth pains. And he said, then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. And at that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. And because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world, he said, as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. During this pandemic, the use of digital platforms have been helpful in reaching more people than the usual physical meetings and congregations. And this is somehow an eye-opener for us. A venue to launch more digital programs for the wider viewership and to have a wider reach of the people who wants to hear the gospel. This will continue as projected that the whole world will no longer return to the old norm, but somehow will be more dynamic, more flexible through the use of different digital platforms. And this can be considered as one of the good things happen during this pandemic. And in verse 15, so when you see standing in the holy place, talking of the abomination that causes desolation, wala pa ito, we have not yet seen this one, spoken of through the prophet Daniel. Let the reader understand, he said, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to their cloak. And how dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. This is talking of a future event. Okay? Talking of a great distress that is unequaled from the beginning of the world and never to be equaled again. Talking of a great event. Okay? A great tribulation. A future event. Okay? In how many years from now? We don't know yet. But personally, I think maybe not in the next 5 to 10 years' time. And in verse 22, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear, and will perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time, Jesus said. So if anyone tells you there he is out in the wilderness, do not go out. Or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Everyone will notice the coming of the Messiah. So do not believe that someone will say that there he is in that room, or there he is in the wilderness. Do not believe that. For he said, wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. And in verse 29, immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, You know that summer is near. So even so, he said, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Then in verse 36, but about the hour or the day, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. And that is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you must also be ready, he said. The Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. The prophecies pronounced by Jesus were very clear, highlighting the events that will occur prior to his return. And bits of these events we are now seeing unfolding. And it seems that there will be more pandemics in the future, and it will be frequent in occurrence. On this pandemic, it is believed that the world economy will suffer and will lose around $8 trillion. And most of the countries will recover to pre-pandemic economic condition in more than 10 years' time. Before they can recover to the pre-pandemic economic condition, it will take them at least 10 years or more to recover. Most of the countries have skyrocketed their borrowings and debts just to sustain and to pump their economies. And this situation can be seen from the third world up to the first world countries. And no country, no one is spared. Countries launch their own economic stimulus programs and packages. And even here in our country, they call it the ayudas, were given through the Bayanihan Act law. In the US, President Biden is lobbying for his Build Back Better program, his own version of BBB, which will address the high inflation rates, the unemployment, the education, and the healthcare programs. Because of the pandemic, the supply chain has been disrupted. The manufacturing, the processing of goods, the transportation in all forms, the land, the air, and the sea, the distribution and the consumption have been badly affected, which resulted to higher inflation rates and unemployment. The whole world will be facing more severe problems in the future, in the near future, like food security, climate change, world peace, acts of terrorism, healthcare problems, and others. On the other hand, The pandemic paved way to digital and financial technology. But it comes also with cybercrimes that have to be addressed as well. Where all these things will lead us. Think of the huge debts, utang of the whole world across all countries, from third world to the first world countries. What the whole world is looking forward to. Think of the present turmoil in different areas, in the US, in the Europe, in Latin America, in South Africa, in Asia, and in particularly here in Southeast Asian region. Okay, there are protests, there are riots in the streets. Okay, people are fighting for their human rights. Okay, they are against the mandatory vaccinations. Where or what the whole world is looking forward to. Are we heading to a deep global depression or recession? Downfall of major economies, which can result to sufferings, to more deaths, to strife, to protests and riots from all fronts? Will there be war between the two world superpowers, the United States and China? And the last question is, where are we now in prophecy? The Bible illustrated in prophetic timeline leading to the return of Jesus. And these are the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 plagues. Where are we now in prophecy? Are we still living during the time of the 7 seals? Or the 7 trumpets have already been started? And from the first trumpet blow, how long will it be till the return of Christ? All these things, all these questions, where this COVID-19 pandemic will lead us to the future. With all these questions and where we are now in prophecy, we will try to learn in the succeeding messages. But for now, Jesus reminded us of this warning as written in Luke chapter 21 in verse 36. He said, "Be always on the watch and pray that we may be able to escape all that is about to happen and that you may be able to stand before the Son of Man." Brethren, let's keep on watching world events. Let's keep on praying for the whole world, for everyone, for our family and brethren. And let's keep praying that God will protect us so we may be able to stand before the Son of Man. Jesus, who's Jesus, our brother and our Savior, when He returns. Brethren, faith should be intact and good deeds should be exercised. Till then, happy Sabbath and God bless everyone.
Hi, hello, greetings to everyone. A happy Sabbath day to all. It's nice to be with you to spend this Sabbath day together. Today, I want to talk to you about one of the greatest Bible stories. And this story is about the crossing of the Red Sea. This story is one of the greatest miracles recorded in the Bible. The story describes God's miraculous rescue of His chosen people, the Israelites, and the destruction of the mighty armies of Pharaoh. Since our early childhood days attending Sunday schools, we have learned to love this story. We have heard numerous messages and sermons on the topic. And we have read maybe this account in the Bibles multiple times. And the scene has been portrayed in many Hollywood movies, with all the special effects. Okay. Nonetheless, the real story has yet to be told. There is more to the story than what meets the eyes. Allow me to invite you to Exodus, the 12th chapter. And I will be reading from the New English Translation to emphasize a few points. And let's turn to verse 37. In verse 37 we read, "The Israelites journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkot. There were about 600,000 men on foot." So there's a qualifier here. So the contingent that left Egypt composed of 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Using this number of 600,000 men on foot, Bible scholars estimated that about 2 million people left Egypt. However, historians challenge this number, and they think that the 600,000 men narrative is too numerous. So let's consider this for a moment. But I think the answer can be found within the text itself. The key phrase or the qualifier is men on foot. So what is meant by men on foot? Okay, there are three ways to understand this. Number one is that these are men conscripted to slavery. Men on foot means people who are able to work. Okay. So this could mean the number of people, men, who were conscripted to slavery. Second, this would mean that men who are able to fight in battle. Because in Exodus, the 13th chapter and in verse 17, we are told that the Israelites went up out of Egypt ready for battle. Okay. And the third could be understood as adult men 13 years and above. At 13 years old, a Jewish boy would be turned into a man. This is bar mitzvah. The Jewish would call it. This is when a Jewish boy becomes a man. So taking together These are able men, and they number about 600,000 according to the scripture. And because of this, the 2 million strong estimate, I think, is a good number. It's a good estimate. Okay? And this is the contingent that left Egypt. 600,000 men on foot, women and children. Then we go to verse 38. 38 verse says that many other people went out with them, and also large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. So there were other people, aside from the 600,000 men from Israel, and their families. There were other people that went out with them because they believed in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of the Israelites. So they left with them, and they brought their livestock with them, and it was described as large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. Okay. And if there were 2 million people who left Egypt, and the livestock that they kept would also be in the millions. Okay. So we'd expect, a few million livestock left with them. So it was a pretty large contingent and a pretty large migration that's happening. Or that happened. Now let's go to Exodus chapter 1. And starting from verse 8, we read, Then a new king who did not know about Joseph came to power over Egypt. And he said to his people, Look at the Israelites people, more numerous and stronger than we are. I'm reading again from the New English Translation. So the new king said, Look at these Israelites. They are more than we are. And they are affluent and they are strong. Right? So that means the 600,000 men is indeed possible. Because they're more numerous than the Egyptians and stronger. And stronger means that they are a strong working class. At the same time, they are, relatively well off. Okay? They have their livestock as their wealth. Okay. And in verse 10 we read, Come, the king said, let us deal wisely with them, otherwise they will continue to multiply, because God has blessed them. And if a war breaks out, they will ally themselves with our enemies and fight against us and leave the country. So they said, we are in great danger, so we must deal with them wisely. We need to oppress them. They're doing too well, they're too many, they're affluent, okay, they're doing well. We need to deal with them smartly, okay. And that's when they came up with the plan to subjugate their independence, and eventually enslave them. Now let's take a look at the journey. When Pharaoh let the people go, God led the Israelites in a circle. God did not lead the Israelites through the Philistine country, which was a shorter route. God didn't want the Israelites to immediately face war, for they might change their mind and return to Egypt. Although the Israelites were ready to fight their way into the promised land, nonetheless, God led the people around by the desert towards the Red Sea. The Lord led the Israelites in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of cloud by night. So when they traveled out of Egypt, the cloud accompanied them even on day one during their travel. So God, through Moses and the cloud, brought them in circle and eventually brought the Israelites to the Red Sea. Then the Lord said to Moses, and he told Moses to take the road down to the Red Sea and encamp at the desert plain. Pharaoh, Moses was told by God, that Pharaoh will continue to be very stubborn and won't accept the idea of the Israelites leaving Egypt. And he will pursue the Israelites. And God said that he will gain glory for himself through Pharaoh and all the Egyptians. And his army will know that the Lord is God. Pharaoh took 600 of his best chariots, officers, and army in pursuit of the Israelites. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up unto the mountains, and they saw the Egyptians coming towards them. They were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Were there no graves in Egypt that you brought us out into the desert to die? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Then the angel of the Lord, who had been traveling with the Israelites, moved from the front to the rear. And the pillar stood in between the Egyptian army and the Israelite camp. It was darkness on the side of the Egyptian army, and there was light on the side of the Israelite camp for the entire night, the whole night long. Moses responded to the people, "Do not be afraid," Moses said. "Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord today. The Egyptians that you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still." Have faith. Yeah. Have confidence. Be comforted. Be still, knowing that God is here and He fights for you. And the Egyptians that you see today, you won't see them ever again. Now let's go to Exodus chapter 14. And let's start from verse 15. Then the Lord said to Moses, so the people complained, what had happened to us? Moses, you have brought us out of Egypt into the desert. Now we're gonna die. Right? We're now gonna die in the desert. And the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Why are you crying? Why are you bringing this up to me? God said to Moses, I am amazed at what God said. Okay, I am amazed at what God said to Moses. God said, why are you crying out to me? What's the problem? God asked Moses. The Israelites, they were boxed in. Right? There's no way out. The options were either to fight the Egyptian army and die, or to escape through the sea, which either option, seemed unattainable. Can fight the Egyptian army on one side, and either can they escape through the great expanse of the Red Sea. Right. Yet, God said to Moses, what are you doing? Why are you whining to me? Why are you complaining? Why are you murmuring? Don't you know what to do? Isn't the solution obvious to you? Isn't the way out obvious to you? Then the Lord told Moses, he said, tell the Israelites to move on. This is very curious to me also. Okay, these two statements. Okay, one is, why are you crying out loud to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Move on where? Right? Well, they're looking at the sea in front of them. Move on. God said, cross the sea to the other side to safety. Proceed towards the promised land. Move on. This requires faith. Moses knew the instruction of the Lord. Move on. Cross the sea towards the promised land. Moses understood the instruction of the Lord. So, they broke camp, they packed, and started moving towards the sea. Of course, led by Moses. Where are we going, Moses? That's the sea in front of us. We're gonna get drowned. Moses, we're gonna get drowned. Right? And Moses said, keep walking. We are crossing the Red Sea to safety. It was a moment of faith. Can you imagine this? Okay? It was a moment of faith. They broke camp, They pack up, they got their things, they gathered their livestock, okay, their children in their hands, okay, and they started moving. Moving where? They walk towards the Red Sea. This was a moment of faith. Walking towards the Red Sea with the prospect of getting drowned. Or maybe, hopefully, the water is only waist high. Okay? Or waist deep. Okay? But it was a moment of faith. In verse 16, God said to Moses, "Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through on sea on dry ground." So God said, "Move on. What are you doing? Move on. Cross the sea." You must scratch your head, how do we do this? He said, "Raise your staff, Moses. Raise your staff on your hand over the sea. Okay? And walk through it. The sea will become dry ground for you." Moses led the company of Israelites towards the sea. And he raised his staff and stretched out as a banner, leading the house of Israel into the Red Sea. As their feet touched the water's edge, the sea miraculously receded. The waters piled up, creating a wall on the right and on the left. It created a patch, a large patch of dry land. It was miraculously dry, conducive to travel on. There were no obstacles of puddles of water, no deep ravines, no big rocks, no trap fishes or seaweeds on the seafloor. It was dry ground. It was not muddy. The Israelites walked on dry ground to safety. It was a great miracle. It was not simply that the water receded. Not only that, the seabed became dry ground, conducive to travel. For men, for women, children, and livestock. Not muddy, but dry ground to travel on. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. As he marched forward, he stretched out his hand over the sea. And all night, the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided. And the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, and with a wall of water on their right and on their left. 2 million strong crossed the Red Sea in one night. 2 million including women and children, and a large droves of livestock, of flocks and herds. It was a magnificent feat, okay, to cross the Red Sea, the expanse of the Red Sea, in probably 9 to 10 hours only. This meant that the 12 tribes crossed the Red Sea simultaneously, at one time. For them to cross the sea in such a short time of 9 to 10 hours, it meant the whole congregation, the 2 million men and women and children, and the large droves of livestock, they cross simultaneously at the same time. And that was how large the path, okay, the land that was available to them to cross. Can you imagine? 2 million people strong and a few million of livestock crossing the seabed, right, in 9 hours. Can you imagine that? How large the area could have been. And that's what happened. God provided not only a mere pathway as portrayed in movies or illustration books, right? It's not a pathway. Small path that, a few people cross it at a time. No, it was a large swathe of ground for 2 million people and the livestock to cross simultaneously. Wow. Not only was the seabed turned into dry ground, it was flat, it was wide, it was expansive to accommodate that kind of a migration. The whole assembly of the house of Israel. It must be a sight to behold. The waters would be held back at the extreme right and at the extreme left. So when you're in the middle, you could hardly see the walls of water on the right and on the left. What you would see is basically the dry ground that you are walking on. Only the tribes that were on the extreme right and the extreme left would see the walls of water that God had parted for them. But at the middle, when you're at the middle, you're far from the walls of water, and you cross through it in safety. In verse 23, the Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. When you are Pharaoh's army, and when you are on the mountain, and you see that vast migration happening, people, livestock, all crossing the great expanse of the Red Sea that has turned into dry ground, you would have thought, what had happened here, right? And you might not even see the walls of water. That's still at the far end of the sea. Right? So when you're on the mountain and you stand up, you just saw a patch of dry ground and the Israelites crossing it. To them, the Pharaoh's army, the sea water just disappeared. It might have gotten diverted and flowed to a different direction. Okay. They didn't see that it was a miracle from God. They never thought that it was a miracle from God. They underestimated the power of the God of heaven. And also they were stubborn, and they were hard-headed and overconfident. They pursued the Israelites into the sea. In verse 24, during the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and drew it into confusion. What is the last watch of the night? The last watch of the night meant somewhere between 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. So for the whole night, the Israelites crossed the Red Sea. Okay, and as day breaks in the early morning, between 3 to 6 a.m., God looked down from the pillar of cloud and He saw the Egyptian armies. And God threw them into confusion. Of course, you'll be confused, right? And God confused it a little bit more. You know, what happened here? You know, what happened to the seawater? You know, could it be diverted? You know, could it have just been a low tide? You know, but it's just too huge an area. Okay? So something might have happened. But never thought that it was the hand of God. Verse 25. He, referring to God, He jogged the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." So they finally realized, when they're in the middle of the river, of the Red Sea, they realize that something's not right. You know? Something isn't, they realize that something isn't right, that God is fighting for them. Okay? In verse 26, then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." The Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." So once the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, okay, Moses once again raised his staff over the sea, and the waters returned. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak, the sea went back to its place. Okay, when the sun rose, at daybreak, okay, most probably around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, the sea went back. The waves rolled back in. The Egyptians were fleeing towards it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. Verse 28. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen. The entire army of Pharaohs that had followed the Israelites into the sea, not one of them survived. Verse 29. But the Israelites went through the sea. Again, the emphasis, on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day, the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. When they crossed over, the Israelites, led by Moses, crossed to safety. They will finally free from the tyranny of Egypt. When they cross the Red Sea to the other side, the Israelites stood vigilant, ready to fight. You know, if the Egyptian armies happened to come on shore, they stood there ready to fight. They lined up the shore, you know, and ready to fight anyone who comes on shore. But instead, what they saw was the dead Egyptian army lying on the shore. The Egyptian armies that they saw the night before, they never saw again. What they saw were their dead bodies lying on the shore. The Israelites stood in awe at the presence and the power of God. When the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptian, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in Him and in Moses, His servant. It was a great event. It was an epic moment and a great story to tell of the great power of God. Now, you have a better perspective of the miracle of the crossing of the Red Sea. A similar event happened during the time of Joshua, when the Israelites crossed the Jordan River into Canaan. And we can read this in Joshua chapter 3, but this time it is about to conquer the land of Canaan, starting with Jericho. Joshua chapter 3 and verse 9 we read, Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that He will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Gergesites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you." Verse 14. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priest carrying the ark of the covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at a flat state all during winter. At this time, the river of Jordan is flooded. The water is very high because it's for the time of the harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the edge of the water. The water from the stream stopped flowing, and it piled up in a heap a great distance away, while the waters flowing down to the sea of the Araba was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of Jordan River and stood on dry ground, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completely crossed on dry land. So it happened again. But this time in a smaller scale. They just only crossed the river. You know? But still, it was a magnificent miracle that God performed for the Israelites. Similarly, it was a large area of the river Jordan. Okay? Because it said here that it backed out from a distance, you know, and the river started flowing, you know, because God stopped it, you know, and the river was completely dry, and the whole nation of Israelites crossed the Jordan River. Obstacles of life are many. In our Christian walk, we are faced with many obstacles. Some are smaller and some are bigger, maybe than the Red Sea or the Jordan River. But in our Christian walk, we face a lot of obstacles, challenges, and persecutions. The lesson we learned today is to keep walking in the faith. God said, what are you doing? Move on. The obstacles may be humongous, like a mountain, an army, or the Red Sea. And these humongous obstacles may hinder our Christian walk and our Christian growth. Sometimes our problem may seem impossible to overcome. And it may seem that there is no way out. That way being boxing. That there is no alternative. Right? Impossible to resolve. When things seem insurmountable, that is when Jesus said, move on. What are you doing? Move on. Move on what? Move on. Walk in the faith. It may be insurmountable to you, but not to the Lord. It's during these times when Jesus walks in front of us. He leads the way. He banners the path. I can tell you that there are many occasions in our lives when events like this, hinders us. We're confronted with this kind of problems. And often, we may not even notice it. You know why? Because we walk through it. And we walk through it in faith. We might encounter a problem. I'm sure all of us have one point of our lives or many occasions that we have a problem. and we walk through it. Not consciously, but unconsciously, we walk through it. Because we walk by faith and in faith. And we may not have noticed it because we walk through it in faith. Faith is an automatic response in obedience to the will of God. We just do it because we think that it is the right thing to do. That's faith in action. Let's take Sabbath keeping as an example. Keeping the Sabbath day holy is not a conscious decision. We don't think about it. It's an automatic response that we observe every week. Sabbath keeping is second nature to us. Okay. If there are problems, obstacles, challenges on a Sabbath day, we just walk through it. Right? We keep the Sabbath. Eventually the problems, will resolve itself. We just do what is right. Because we know that it is right. That is faith in action. Only when we break the Sabbath routine, that's the only time that our conscience is pricked. But otherwise, no. We walk through it in faith. Same thing when it comes to keeping the law on clean and unclean meats. Okay. We just walk through it. Just do it. And because you are faithful to God and refuse to compromise, good things happen. On occasions when we are faced with a problem, be it a workplace problem, job related maybe, a career problem, a business problem, a personal problem, a relationship problem, maybe a health or financial problems. Somehow we are able to overcome them. At times, miraculously. And when this happens, we don't think about it. Right? There was a solution to our problems. Okay, but we don't compromise our belief in our faith. We just do what is right. We walk through it. And in these occasions, we must realize, we must be cognizant of the fact that God walked before us and He cleared the path for us. So the lesson of the crossing of the Red Sea and the Jordan River is what Jesus said to Moses. Jesus said, move on. Move on in faith. He leads the way. And we have in our lives, crossed many Red Seas and crossed many Jordan rivers that we don't even ourselves realize. And you know why? Because we move on faith. That is to your credit. And today we take this opportunity to thank the Lord for the waters that He has parted for us. that we may walk on dry ground towards the kingdom that He has prepared for us. So, brethren, move on. Move on. And a happy Sabbath day to one and all.